Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Monday, April 25th, 2022 City of Gardner Planning Commission meeting to order. If everyone will please rise and state the Pledge of Allegiance with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll now move into Commissioner roll call, starting on my right.
Commissioner Ham here.
Commissioner Hanson here.
Commissioner Mader here.
Commissioner McNair here.
And
Commissioner Cooper here.
I wasn't sure if she hooked
Okay.
up all the way.
Perfect. Looks like we got her just in time. Great. So we have 5 commissioners present here. We have 1 remote, so that makes a total of 6 with 1 absent. We have a quorum. Moving on to the consent agenda. All matters listed within the consent agenda have been distributed to each member of the Planning Commission for study. These items are considered to be routine and will be enacted upon by one motion with no separate discussion. If separate discussion is desired on an item from either the Planning Commission or from the floor, that item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. Is there any item any member of the commission would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Any item any member of the floor would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion on this item.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion made by McNair with a second by Hanson. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Consent agenda is approved. Regular agenda item number 1. University Park rezoning Z-22-01 and preliminary development plan PDP-22-01 is a public hearing item. At the northwest corner of University Drive and West 167th Street, this is an item continued from the Planning Commission meeting on March 28, 2022. We have a presentation this evening from staff.
Yes, we do. Again, this is item 1A and 1B. It was tabled at the last meeting. For this meeting, I'm just going to briefly go over, I'm not going to give a full-blown presentation, but I'll show you some of the changes that have been made to the site plan. Again, this is subject property is approximately 35.5 acres located at the northwest intersection of 167th Street and White Drive. The property is currently undeveloped. Again, the proposal was tabled from the March Plan Commission meeting. We have received additional information from the school corporation, fire department, and we have the traffic engineers here tonight to answer any questions the commission may have regarding this development. The school corporation did not have any concerns with the development and told us that it fits within their long-range plans. And the fire department reviewed the proposal and submitted a letter of approval and are here tonight to answer also any questions. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning from RP3 district to the RP5 district based on the findings in the staff report. And then preliminary development plan, as you can see up on the screen, has not changed that much, except they did pull the townhomes on the north side. They moved them to the south, I think about 30 feet. You can see that a little bit better. I think the concern was to save the tree line that's existing out there right now. The architectural rendering shows ample screening to the adjacent single family and duplex development. And like I said, the applicant has moved the overall site to the south to maintain that tree line. And the bottom kind of elevation site or sight line shows about 200 feet. I think the prior one was 170 feet. Staff finds that this development provides a mix of housing which can serve multiple age groups in the Gardner population. The proposed development promotes site and building design and mitigates potential impacts on adjacent property owners. The site is capable of accommodating the building's uses and other site design elements. The architecture and materials provide for quality buildings, and the overall design is compatible to the context considered the location and distance between the adjacent commercial, zoned, and residential property. I'm going to go ahead and go through the deviations again, just so we have those fresh in your mind. First deviation request is for accessory buildings. The code states that we can have only one per lot. They're proposing 30 garage structures and one maintenance structure. Again, the standard appears to be intended to address single-family residential uses. It's not really realistic to limit an apartment complex to one accessory building. So the staff supports this deviation. Deviation 2 is that the accessory building shall not exceed 250 square feet for each 3,000 square feet of lot area, up to a maximum of 1,200 square feet. And right now they're proposing 30 1,700 square foot garage structures and one 1,090 square foot maintenance building. Again, these are really geared towards single family in the code, but we support this deviation as well. And then the required parking, bicycle parking, one per dwelling unit and 5% of the required vehicle space for the entertainment clubhouse uses within 1,000 feet of the designated bike rack. Proposed 70 bike parking spaces. They're wanting just 70 out of the required 606, and staff again supports this deviation. Staff recommendation, staff recommends approval of the rezoning and associated preliminary development plan with the conditions outlined in the motion below. And I believe we have the engineer here who's wanted to give a presentation as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Name and address for the public record, please.
Thank you. My name's Judd Clausen with Phelps Engineering, 1270 North Winchester, Olathe, Kansas. We're the civil engineers and surveyors for the record. It's good to see everyone again tonight. Thank you for your time and taking a look at this project for us. At the last meeting, we had several questions, several things that we were tasked with doing and going back and taking a look at and getting answers for you. So hopefully tonight we're able to check the box for those types of things for you here tonight. With me tonight is Greg Preeb with Preeb Homes, developer for the project. His family's owned this land for quite some time now, and we're looking to move forward with the project and build this community. Cade Brummer with NSBJ Architecture here as well too. So questions on the building, I reserve the right to phone a friend and have him come on up here and answer those questions. And also with us virtually on the screen is Janelle Clayton, Merge Midwest. She's our traffic engineer. So any questions there, she can jump in and help us out on that. So just real briefly, this was the previous site plan. The area circled in red on the north end of the site. We had gotten some comments from the neighbors at the last meeting and to see what we could do about improving those sight lines and what does it look like from those locations, from the neighbors to the north and such. So we spent some time adjusting the site plan, as Bob alluded to in his presentation. We took those townhomes. Well, first of all, in this site plan, we weren't able to save the majority of those trees from the street that goes back to the quarry there on the left-hand side of the screen. The trees on the south side, a lot of those we weren't saving because we had things kind of spread out and we were grading into that area and we were planning to take those trees down and such. But after comments that we heard, we took another harder look at that and came back, and I'm pleased to report we are able to save those trees. We took those townhomes and shifted them farther south, creating more room in there. And if you'll watch the screen here, I'm going to forward to the next screen, you can kind of see the effect of that. You can kind of see those buildings shifted south. Now we're able to save those trees. It's going to make a dramatic difference for our neighbors as well as for the new residents in those townhomes too, because that gravel road is still in service. We don't own it. The neighbors don't own it. It's for the quarry, and it'll be a big improvement to try to save those to be able to save those trees there. The rest of the site plan changes, there were no other changes other than that. We really wanted to focus on that part of it because that's what we heard is kind of a big deal as far as sightlines. As Bob alluded to, we had some cross sections. The upper left there kind of shows two areas where we cut those cross sections. There was one cut through the northern end of the site from north to south. You'll see that on the very upper left-hand side, and if I had a pointer, I'd maybe point to it. And then there's one kind of cut east and west through the site. So the middle graphic there is a site section that's east and west. To the right is University Boulevard, and you can kind of see how that site section kind of cuts through there, through the 4-story section, which is those L buildings in the middle of the site there. The bottom section, probably of more of interest, especially to the neighbors. This was updated to show that the townhomes are sliding a little farther south, and we're able to save that landscape buffer with the berming in there. So where we do have areas where those trees maybe are a little sparse, and once we get into the final plantings and stuff, we're planning to add a few evergreens as well in those areas to help supplement that. And you see that with those evergreen trees and that berm right adjacent to the house there in that area. So we do plan to supplement that as we need to. So kind of what does that look like from a pictorial standpoint? Our architects in SPJ, they're very good at doing graphic representations down to real Google Earth and how that all looks. And so we did 4 site perspectives starting on the left. There's 1 and 2 up at the north end of the site, really looking kind of from a backyard, and then also from the street. And then there's 3, which is from University Boulevard area from a backyard in there. And then 1 over at the south end of the site, number 4, looking back towards the north, just to kind of give you an idea what that might look like. And as you would expect, with being able to save a lot of those trees, you're not, obviously this is a summertime view. There's times when leaves aren't on the trees. But you can kind of barely see the buildings to the background there. You can see the overhead power lines. This is number 2 from the road. Again, saving those trees makes a huge difference. You've kind of got like 2 buffers there going on. And then this is University looking that way, so you can kind of give an idea as to the scale and what the landscape does. And with those buildings shoved as far west as we possibly can, that kind of keeps things from a lower profile off the street. So with the berming and such, it almost appears as a 3-story building. And then this is the south end, looking back towards the north, and you can see the power lines, and that building at the south end is obviously pretty far away across the pond and such there. So kind of give you some ideas of what that might look like. Again, revised site plan. We revised the landscape plan and such for it, but that's really all I had to present tonight, and I know you have more detailed questions on the traffic, so I'll let the traffic engineers talk about that.
Great, thank you. I don't know if there's anything we want to have the engineers speak to directly. If we're done with presentations, we should move forward with the public hearing? Dave
We
looked like you wanted to
could
say
do that. I would suggest, and I think it would be appropriate maybe to have the public hearing. Let's hear if there are any other comments out there. As alluded to, I know there were some specific concerns regarding traffic, fire, and school. We can wrap that up in our discussion, or after the public discussion here, have those consultants chime in on details, because there may be other questions that are raised tonight, depending on who speaks.
Agreed. Okay, great. All right, so we'll now open the public hearing. Those wishing to speak on this item, please come forward, state your name and address for the public record. Individuals will be given approximately 3 minutes to speak. Those representing a group will be given approximately 5 to 7 minutes to speak. Come forward, be heard.
Hello again. Brian Keaney, 28605 West 162nd Place, obviously in Gardner. I do appreciate you guys listening. As some of you on this board already know, this is our second development that we've been up here trying to talk about. I do like what they've done about pushing that back and everything else. I do have some questions about like lighting. Do you have like the lighting setups and things like that that we can discuss at some point in time?
At a future date, that's a final development plan item, so that'll come back.
Okay. As far as the schools and the fire, if you've got them on board, I mean, obviously there's no need for us to. That was one thing we all brought up the first time. So if they're on board, then they're on board. Again, I know they show the pictures and the renderings and everything, but as a 4-story apartment, the new ones we have going out there by Claire, past Walmart, those are only 3-story, and you've seen how big those are out there. If we're in our upstairs bedrooms looking out, we're going to see these all the time. So whether they've got the ground elevation or the, it's lower, whatever they want to say it is, we're still going to see these 4-story apartments looking out the back of our houses. My wife and I didn't spend a good chunk of money to build the house of our dreams to have to worry about these. Again, by them pushing out, that's great, but I still have this behind my $400,000 house. I'm not trying to be, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not trying to be uppity. I'm just trying to say that I don't need these apartments. We already have tall grass right behind my house with 178 to 200 foot out my back door, not my property line, out my back door. It's off my back door. I mean, it's I could throw a baseball that far with my offhand. I mean, it's not that far. Gardner's growing, it is, but how many apartments do we need? And why they all seem to be coming to our side of town? I don't understand that either. I mean, I know there's land there, and I like the fact they're taking that off Claire and 175th Street out there, and that's great. That's farm country. Nobody lives out there. If we want to build more apartments, that's fine. Down by Orchlands in that area too, but why is everything coming to our side of town where we've all built these houses? We're probably one of the biggest tax communities in Gardner with the size of our houses and the size of our community. It's just, I don't understand. I guess that's my big concern right now is why is it all happening on our side of town and nowhere else really around? I know we're building stuff everywhere else, but it seems like it's right by us all the time. The fire study, like I said, is already done. I'm not trying to be uppity. I'm really not. It's just, it's aggravating that we thought we built our dream house. We had the land behind us where, the APAC road is there, the trees are there, nobody's building behind us, but then all of a sudden, and I know people have to grow and people have to live and stuff like that, but to bring this in right now, they compare it to the ones in Lenexa. I'm a police officer in Lenexa, I agree. We have 4-story apartments in Lenexa. However, the first story is businesses. The top 3 stories are apartments. So they're actually bringing more into the city than just 4-story apartments for whatever reason. So, I mean, I don't know. Again, I'm aggravated. It is what it is. I'll get through it because unfortunately this is inevitable. It always is. This is just my chance to speak, and I apologize if I'm out of line, but I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who would like to speak on this item? That I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to close the public hearing made by McNear with a second by Ham. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Stacy, I don't know if Stacy's still on.
Stacy is still on. She's muted. There she is.
I am, yes, I, not,
Thank you. Public hearing is now closed. Commission discussion, obviously, we have a comment made by one member of the public, so we have notes here to talk through and make sure we have questions addressed from there. We also have with us, like stated, we've got the applicant, we've got both our, correct me Dave, we have both our traffic study
Yes.
individual.
So the city engineer is here tonight. Our traffic consultant, Christopher, is here on Zoom tonight, so if there are some specific questions there. And Janelle is the applicant's traffic engineer who did the traffic study. So what happens on traffic studies, just so you know, they are submitted as part of the preliminary and final development plans. They'll do a preliminary traffic study, and then as the final plan comes forward, they finalize that. That study is done independently as part of the applicant team. It is submitted to the city. The city hands that off to our traffic consultant, who then reviews it independently and provides comments back to the city through the city engineer's office and public works department. So we've got all those players here if there are specific questions there. We also had forwarded to you prior to the meeting several weeks ago the actual traffic report, and as you saw, it's 180 pages of very technical background and work that goes into that. So if you have some questions, these folks are here to help you with that. Also, fire department, you should have, I believe you do have, their letter in the packet, but the fire chief is here as well as staff who does the plan review. In case you have questions there, because I know there's some questions about apparatus and capability, training, things like that from a fire department perspective. I think most of those questions were answered in their letter, but again, we're here for you as a resource. And then finally, the school district, who could not be here tonight, their representative couldn't make it, has had communications with staff. We shared information. We got further information to them and their demographer. They have a consultant who does work with them, and those folks took a look at everything, and basically they had development in this area in their plans over the next 3 to 5 years already, so they were kind of anticipating that from a facility standpoint. The points that they really were, I'm not going to say they were concerned about, but points that they raised, of course, is that they may have to come up with some alternative bus routing to handle how the students get there, and then a few concerns about sidewalk connectivity and things like that for the kids that have to walk to different schools from here. So those are bigger issues than the development itself, but again, it's not as if they weren't anticipating it, and it's not as if they were saying the building would be overcrowded at this point in time.
Great, thank you.
So I don't know where you want to go with questions first or how you want to go about it. So
Yeah, I was just, I appreciate you letting the commission and members of the public know who we have, because I knew there was a large slate of additional, experts and resources we can ask questions to. I was just gonna go round table style,
okay, just see
starting
what you
with some general questions, and I thought I would start with our phone participant, Commissioner Cooper. If you wanna start with any questions, comments that you might have at this point, we might do a couple of round robins just as we've had the discussion, but if you'd like to go first.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. All right, I'll just proceed around. Commissioner McNair.
No questions, but I do have a couple of comments to our staff. Thank you for digging into this and really putting the effort into getting the information that we had questions on last month. Very good job. Thank you, guys.
Commissioner Hanson.
One of the questions that was asked by Mr. Keaney involving why so much development near this area. I know in our staff report there was information provided that kind of references the comprehensive plan, I believe, of 2014. Is there some general information that you guys can kind of share to help address that question?
Okay, I'll go for it. I looked to Bob because he authored the report, but just in this area, of course, 167th and Moonlight, there had been previous development plans here prior that had been approved, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why this property was zoned R3 previously, or currently is zoned R3. which is a garden apartment style zoning. So it would allow 4 apartments to be on this property as it's zoned today. They would either come through the plan review process and do a plan district similar to this, or they would do a site plan review if they could meet all of the design requirements of the code, which is generally pretty difficult. With the R3 zoning, it would be slightly lower density potentially development, but again, more buildings, more apartment structures. So instead of maybe the 2-story, 3-story type structures that you're seeing with garden apartments, which would be similar to the tall grass. If you think of the tall grass structures, those are garden apartment type structures. The 4-story allows for the elevator to be utilized. I believe you heard last month that there has been some change in the market in the sense of older individuals that are seeking rentals, and they're basically taking up as many of the first floor units as they can. What the elevator allows is for that market segment to potentially have units that are at higher floor levels. Obviously, an open staircase that goes 3 stories or 4 stories is not conducive to that kind of renter. So there is a little bit of a trade-off in the sense of the height of the structures and the allowance under the RP5, but the difference is that you have a very different framework for open space and a very different framework from the perspective of some of the design qualities and elements. So from a comprehensive plan, I would tell you the 2014 comprehensive plan, as well as the previously approved development, it was showing that this development was going to occur, maybe not in this exact form, but from the standpoint of more population density and potentially commercial development in the area, that's where it was heading.
Thank you.
Questions? Okay.
And I'll just add real quick, so, and I believe this, even the property on White Drive, if you go to the property to the east of this, the previous development plan there was showing some office and commercial type development in that area, so just so you're aware.
Commissioner Ham?
Okay. I have a couple of comments and then a question. Mr. Keaney, I just want you to know that we hear you. And one of the reasons why the Planning Commission is made up of people of the community is because this affects us too. And so I want you to know that we all have skin in the game as well. And so I want you to know that we are concerned about the community and we see this, and our homes, our lives are affected by these things that we make decisions on. So it's not done in isolation. And I just want you to understand that we are not discounting anything that you said here tonight. And I just want to thank you for coming and speaking here tonight. Thank you. One of the questions that I did have, thank you for the pictures that you presented. It kind of gave me a better visual of what was going on. I looked at the digital copy that we're also provided, and so that was a little clearer than what the picture, what a copier doesn't really do it justice. But what I saw at home gave me a better idea of what you were trying to accomplish. And I think Dave and Bob, forgive me, but I think last month we had mentioned, I think you had mentioned that this developer didn't have to do the setbacks the way that they were. Like if we were to like invite somebody else, that they would not necessarily have to set back the homes or the apartments as far from the street as this developer is. What am I misremembering?
Yeah, just like what Dave had mentioned just a little bit ago about the history of the site, the R3 zoning would not necessarily require as large of setbacks as what's depicted on this site plan, and that was kind of the whole reason for them to apply for the rezoning, so that they could go a little taller, but they could move the buildings to the interior of that land.
Okay. All right. So what I was thinking, especially after seeing the pictures that we were provided with this time, was that yes, like Mr. Keaney said, you know, the elevation, but we're also being given the opportunity to set these back a little bit to where they're not on top of everyone. And so I'm trying to weigh out the greater good, and I know some of us have to sacrifice, but we could be in a not a more advantageous position is what I'm thinking here. So those are just my comments. I might be thinking out loud, but those are just my comments. And I just wanted clarification. I just wanted to make sure I was remembering about the setback and the space that we were getting from the road. That's all I have.
Okay. Commissioner Souza.
Hi. So yeah, I took a chance to take a look at the digital images that were sent to us prior. So this window here is blocking the view. Is there a way that you can move up? Yeah, maybe on the top. Is there any
Does that window move? Does this?
Oh, it just stays there. That's all right. I know there is a concern, I think last time we met, that traffic, I understand that there was some study done on 167th and University. Can you guys comment on, I understand that 167th, they're thinking about putting a traffic light there, but how about University? Is anything done or any comments to be made as far as traffic on University? Because I don't see any exits from the apartments on 167th. I don't know if this window here is blocking, but I see that all the exits from the apartments are towards White Drive and University. Am I reading this right?
Yep. There are no access points on 167th Street. So if the screen were moved, you'd see that. So there are no access points there. All the access points are either on White Drive or University. I don't know, Judd, do you want to speak a little bit to this, or have your traffic consultant speak about the findings of the traffic study, and then maybe Tim or Chris may want to talk a little bit more about things that are a little bit beyond what this study that was done, or the focus and scope of this study was for this project.
Sure. On the access drives, we don't have any access on 167th that wouldn't meet the spacing criteria for a full access there anyway, because that dimension along 167th is pretty narrow. And you know, that's the purpose of White Drive and University, for that matter, to be more of a collector for the area, to collect traffic off of developments and bring them in a controlled intersection where you can see in the corner of the screen here on the right where White Drive comes into 167th. Is a four-way intersection there, and that's how you want to set that up. As far as capacity, you know, we and Janelle, I'm going to have you speak to generally what our findings were, what we were asked to study, and what our recommendations are. But we did a pretty thorough analysis here of the existing background traffic, factored in the approved developments, albeit they're not all the way filled up yet, but we made a compensation in the background traffic for those developments that aren't completely full yet, and then added our traffic, and we found that we needed a couple of turn lanes added. And Janelle, I'll let you kind of go into a little higher level detail of what that is, if you would, please.
Sure. Hi, my name is Janelle Clayton with Merge Midwest Engineering, located at 2668 West Catalpa Street in Olathe, Kansas. And I was the traffic engineer who prepared the traffic study for Phelps Engineering. So I guess just as a background, we worked with city staff at the beginning of the process to kind of determine the scope of our project, what intersections we should study around the development, and then also what other adjacent development traffic we wanted to consider within the traffic study. And so working with city staff, they provided a traffic study that was done for the Tallgrass development. And within that Tallgrass development traffic study, there was also traffic generations for the Justice Center and Moonlight Plaza as well, as well as the Tallgrass apartments. So we considered all of the unbuilt portions of those developments, which worked out to be about 25% of the Tallgrass apartments are open and seem occupied. So we took 75% of those trip generations for the Tallgrass development and added those into our background traffic. And we called all this background traffic a planned traffic scenario, is how it's referred to in the traffic study. So we took 75% of the Tallgrass traffic and added that back in. The Justice Center is open and operational, so we did not add any additional traffic for that development. Moonlight Plaza, there are some unoccupied buildings now in that development to the south. So we assumed 70% of that had been built. So the remaining 30% of a shopping center development, background traffic was added back into background traffic as well as planned traffic. So we took all that planned traffic and added our development traffic on top of that. And working with city staff, we identified the intersections we were going to analyze, and those included the intersections along University Drive and our connections to that, University Drive and White Drive and University and Moonlight. And then we also studied Moonlight and 167th and White Drive, and then White Drive and the proposed access points. So the way the site is laid out in the density of the development, it worked out that about 50% of the development traffic was going to be basically utilizing University Drive, while the other 50% would come out White Drive. And those distributions are outlined in the traffic study and how we assign traffic out there. And what we had found, we needed an eastbound left turn lane at 167th and White Drive. So that's a recommendation that I put in the study for the developer to construct, and that would be needed with the existing plus the site traffic. And then we also just determined that a southbound right turn lane at the intersection of Moonlight Road and 167th Street was necessary. And that is when we included existing plus site plus all the background planned traffic as well. That's when that right turn lane was needed. We also did a thorough a signal warrant analysis at 167th and Moonlight as requested by the city, where we looked at not only peak hour signal warrants, but 8-hour warrants and 4-hour warrants to see if there was a signal warrant met there today, which there was not. And we don't meet it with the existing plus site plus background traffic. But as things develop in the future, it's expected that eventually will need to be signalized in the future. Our development was a small percentage of that. I think it was like 6% of our site traffic contributes to that signal warrant. But that is something that the city should keep in mind in the future. There'll need to be a traffic signal at 167th and Moonlight. And also at 167th and White, it may need also a westbound left turn lane once those future volumes develop along 167th. So the westbound left turn lane going south into that development might be warranted in the future just due to the through traffic on 167th. So those were our recommendations. I think we included as much as we could with the background traffic, and we did the future 20-year scenario as well with the 2% growth mainly throughout the study area, just to make sure that we were accounting for future development potential. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So we have here for questions. Commissioner Soiza, anything else from you?
Nope. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, please. We'll just go back around.
I know on page 17 of the traffic impact study, you had just mentioned about in the future about the westbound turn lane off of 167th and White Drive. It just says in the future plus site plus plan traffic volume. Does that fall in the 20-year, or is there some formula that you have of occupancy that would be once you hit this level, that's when you should include the westbound turn lane? Is there a specification, a scenario that would be needed?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. The future scenario, you're right, there is just the 20-year projected background volumes. So we kind of grow the existing traffic along 167th, 2% a year over 20 years, and that's what we call a future 20-year background volume. And so that's when that lane is warranted. It doesn't really have anything to do with traffic turning into our site. It's really all just dependent upon that through traffic on 167. So which we're looking at a 20-year horizon. It may or may not develop to that level. It's more of a planning tool for the city. If they do any improvements on 167, to keep that in mind. If they ever improve that in the future, to consider maybe a left turn lane there, the westbound left turn lane.
That was my only question for right now.
Commissioner Hanson?
I don't have any questions relative to the traffic study, but I am looking for a copy of the letter from Johnson County Fire District #1.
Oh, it was in the digital.
Oh, did it not make the paper copy?
There wasn't a paper copy, it was only in the
I'd
digital.
love to see it.
I'd like to see it for just a second.
Yeah, it's listed as one of the attachments, so I have everything else.
It's online.
Yeah, it's online.
Okay, I didn't. I'll just look at the back. Thank you very much.
While we're
Appreciate it.
doing that too, I want to clarify. Oops. Normally you press down to turn it on. What I want to clarify though, in my comments to Commissioner Hanson very quickly, the comprehensive plan from 2014 did show this as a lower density residential, which is what's in the staff report. The zoning piece, the higher density zoning piece and the office and commercial zoning was granted back in 2003. So once those rights are kind of given up, even though the comp plan may show a preferred scenario or a guidance scenario, when we have that zoning in place already, we look at that zoning.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, that's why I didn't have any questions for the fire department, because I didn't realize I was reading this while I was at work. And so I was reading it online, and I didn't even think about it wasn't in the hard copy, but.
I guess while we're still in the traffic, anything else come to your
I
mind?
went into the fire.
Okay, so we'll wait and pass the letter down. I don't know, Dave, we do have our city engineer here, our city
Yeah, and I don't know.
traffic, I don't know if we.
Tim may want to supplement. I'm just going to make comments. So understand the traffic studies that are done with our developments. We do this all the time with our planned districts. When we get this development plan scenario, we're asking for these traffic studies. Their focus is on the impact of the development proposal and what the immediate needs are to address that impact.
So
So
the
that-
immediate needs, not.
Well, it's immediate, but, right, it's that idea that a westbound turn lane or whatever is recommended in there would need to be done immediately as part of the development. So it's a burden that's placed on the developer. Beyond that, the city does through its capital improvements programming and its long-range planning, we're looking at this as it's evolving, and we put together the program for what may be greater improvements at another time in the future. So that background information that is being fed into the system, Tim and the traffic consultants look at, and as they are putting together capital improvement projects, which may include widening 167th Street to an alternate configuration or a signal at an intersection that's nearby to this location, that becomes the city's responsibility at that point in time, because it can't just be attributed to that one development coming online at that one
Okay.
time. Does that make sense? Tim, am I
Yes.
going over that okay?
Okay, so the way I understand that, yes, they put that in the traffic impact study, but that is not the developer's
Right, there's a
responsibility. That will be the
point,
city.
right, there's a point that it ends up being the city's responsibility. And we may talk outside of this item, I may talk a little bit more about that with you later in the meeting, because I think it may be, we may want to do a workshop at a future date so that you have an understanding of how the city approaches these long-range projects, how we look for the funding for them, and what goes into that process, beyond
Okay.
just these development proposals.
Okay.
That'd be fair. Okay. Everyone good on the letter? Okay, just one more
It's
time.
all mine.
Commissioner Cooper, did you have anything else on the traffic study? While we have that topic at hand, make sure all those questions are vetted. Guessing probably not, but just give it an
I
opportunity.
don't.
Okay, great. Okay, with that, I don't have any other questions on the traffic study. That answered what I had. We'll move to any questions for the fire district, and Commissioner Cooper, I'm going to put you back on the hot seat again. Anything else you'd like to to bring up, or just general questions, knowing we've got a lot of subject matter experts here and folks in the know that can share information should you have anything.
Not right now.
Okay. All right, I'll look to my left. Commissioner McNear?
I had a chance to review that letter. Just want to make sure that I understand. We have aerial apparatus that could be deployed on a first or second alarm. Could you kind of give us a sense of how that would work?
Sure. Dennis Myers, I'm the fire chief, Fire District Number 1. I live at 21354 South Clara Road, Spring Hill. Yeah, so on a typical building structure fire, we would send at least 5 heavy trucks, which would be pumpers, aerials. There's 5 of those coming. And the first district that this would be in, with the truck would come out of New Century, and that's a 100-foot aerial truck. That's the truck that runs out of there every day. So in the district, we actually have 3 aerial trucks. We have another 100-foot aerial truck that's at the new station that would also respond to that. So, you know, a lot of people think when we have a building fire, the closest fire station runs, and that's the only fire station that goes to that. Well, it takes, you know, a building fire like this would take like somewhere around 15 to 20 first alarm firefighters to respond to that. So there's about 3 on each one of the trucks minimum staffing. So we also have automatic gate agreements through Olathe, Lenexa, all the surrounding Johnson County departments would roll into that. In fact, Olathe for sure would probably have a truck, an engine that would respond to that out of their new station right off of 151st Street because they're the closest. So we don't care whose district it is, it's the closest apparatus responds to all those type of calls. So yeah, you hit a second alarm, you're going to get at least 3 more engines and another aerial truck. So I feel like we've got that pretty well covered. An aerial truck that we have today is 100 foot. It'll more than reach and take care of this 4-story building. Typically, once you get over a 4-story, you get into 5 and 6, it would be considered a high-rise type building. You know, most of those high-rise buildings you don't fight with aerial trucks. You're usually on the inside, working your way to the fire to put the fires and stuff out. But you know, the good thing about this project, and by the building codes, it's fully sprinkled building, which is the best thing that we could ever have, and including the balconies, which with the garden-style apartments or apartments today, that seems to be one of the main causes of fires, people either smoking or barbecuing on the balconies. And these are, by code, they're sprinkled on the balconies, which is a good thing. You know, our biggest risk with a project like this, if you remember a few years ago, the city placed fire in Overland Park. It was during the construction phase. And that's the biggest risk we have is during the construction phase, where we don't have all the fire protection up and running in the building, including sheetrock and fire stops and sprinkler systems and things like that. You know, those are my bigger concerns when we have a project like this. And we train on that on a regular basis because that's going to be big water, fast water to try to get it knocked down before it goes to the next building, So, yeah, we're well aware of these kind of things. That's why it's extremely important during the construction phase that we have good access to the buildings. If they do catch on fire, that we can get there. You know, it's not like a dirt road. We need hard surfaces in place during the construction of the building so we can get there and do what we need to do. And the water system, hydrant systems and stuff like that. So,
thanks for sharing the expertise and the ability of training, equipment, apparatus, and coverage.
Yeah,
that's excellent. Thank
you.
We
have it, and it's fairly new, and we train with that stuff they were training today with them actually. So we have no concerns with this project. We think it's a great project for the city as far as, you know, the buildings and stuff like that. We have great access. The roads are great. My fire marshal, Brad Ralston, you know, we've looked through the plan several times and talked about turns and radiuses where we can turn the aerials and get them in there and stuff. And they've done a great job of planning that out for us.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Hanson?
I was just going to say thank you for a copy of the letter. Appreciate that. I've just kind of gone back during the discussion here and looked at the question and answer session that were in the minutes from the last meeting, and it seems like we've covered most every concern that was out there. Appreciate all the additional information that's been provided. Looks like the school district is on board. Obviously, the public safety folks are good to go. I do appreciate the fact that the developer is taking some extra effort to protect some of those tree lines that were discussed at the previous meeting. I know the sight line is always going to be a challenge, but you know, you've done some things to try to improve that aspect of the project. So those are all the comments that I have at this point.
Okay. Commissioner Ham?
I just, one other question. The bulk of the trees that are going around the outside of the property are gonna be evergreen so that there is that buffer, correct? Is that what you had discussed the last time? I just wanted to verify, because I know we had talked about the trees going along the outside. I wanna make sure that we're getting as much buffer between the rest of the community and this as possible.
So it's gonna be a mix of evergreens and deciduous
Okay.
trees, so both.
Okay.
So, you know, obviously you're losing the leaves on your deciduous trees
Right.
in the winter and stuff, so it's important to complement that with evergreens as well. So it'll be a mix of both, and then there's shrubs and stuff. But
Okay.
really kind of more focused on that north end, planting some additional evergreens where we may have gaps or thin areas in that tree. Like, you saw the photo. I mean, it's pretty solid.
Yeah.
But, that's something that we'll evaluate as we get into final design and under construction to supplement that as we may be needed. But yeah, all intentions are that we're going to meet your city's landscape code, and in many instances we're surpassing it. So.
Okay, that's it.
So, Commissioner Ham, we did put up the revised landscape plan just so you can see that as well.
Okay.
Even though I think the legend is covered, which doesn't help us very much here. But as Judd had mentioned, part of this will be at final development stage. You'll see more finalized plans with more details on. So.
Any other questions, Commissioner Ham?
No, I'm good.
Commissioner Soza?
I don't have any questions.
And I don't have anything else to add either. If there's no additional questions, comments from the commissioner, I'd entertain a motion on this item.
I'll make that motion. After review of applications Z-2201 and PDP-2201, a rezoning from RP3 Planned Garden Apartment District to RP5 Planned Apartment District and associated preliminary development plan dated March 4, 2022, and staff report dated April 25, 2022 for University Park Apartments located at the northwest intersection of 167th Street and White Drive. The Planning Commission approves the application and requests deviations and recommendations from the governing body approve these applications subject to the following conditions. Number one, approval of transportation impact study and stormwater management plan by the City of Gardner Public Works Department, and two, construction of a 10-foot wide trail on the north side of 167th Street with an attachment to the proposed internal walkway system.
I second.
We have a motion made by McNear with a second by Ham. Any questions or clarifications on the motion? With that, I'll take it to a vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Chairperson Mader. Oh, Chairperson Mader, I just want to make sure that we get Commissioner Cooper's
Thank you.
vote, because I
Yes.
didn't hear it necessarily.
I didn't either. Thank you for that call out. My bad, Commissioner Cooper. I
I
apologize.
chimed in at the same time everybody else did, so. It
Was
was
that a
in
yes?
favor of that.
It was in
helps.
favor. Thank you. Thank you for the call out, Dave. Okay, that we will move on then.
Also, so that everybody knows in the audience, this item goes to the city council, actually the governing body, because the mayor will vote on it as well, at the second meeting in May. Yeah, second meeting in May, which I believe, if somebody looks it up real quick, that'd be great. I forgot. I believe it's May 16th, but I'm not sure. I
While
believe
they're
it's
looking
May
that up,
16th.
Marshall Ralston, do you need your letter back?
No, sir.
Okay.
I believe it's May 16th will be the
Okay.
their second meeting. So this is a recommendation going forward to the governing body for consideration.
Okay. I think before we go on to the next item, I think Commissioner McNear had a quick comment after this process?
Yes, Dave, I wanted to kind of just follow up on maybe a comment you'd made earlier. Do you think it'd be a good idea to put a work session together between city council, planning, probably public works and any other city organization, just to look at the long-term arterial level traffic flow within the city of Gardner?
Yeah, I've spoken with the Public Works Director, Kellen Headley, about this, and I think it'd be good for us first to have a staff and planning commission kind of workshop to go over things, because you do have involvement in the overall capital improvements program annually. That comes forward to you to determine if it's consistent with the comprehensive plan and growth projections in the comprehensive plan. The discussion you had last month as well as here today highlights that with the new commissioners as members and also the level of the discussion, it would be good to have that conversation so that you can see where sometimes the responsibility of the developer is left and where the city's responsibility picks up as we have these growth demands going throughout the community.
Thank you. That's why I waited until now, because I saw those as two separate issues. Thank you.
Good suggestion. All right, regular agenda item number 2. Frontier Community Credit Union, Final Development Plan, FDP-22-04, at the southeast corner of South Gardner Road and West 187th Terrace, 18751 Gardner Road. Presentation from staff this evening.
Right, item 2, FDP 2204 for Frontier Credit Union. This is a proposal. The lot is currently undeveloped and has been used for agricultural purposes. Existing utility infrastructure, including sanitary sewer and electric, are located adjacent to the parcel. Currently, this lot has access to 187th Terrace and to Vivian Road within the Plaza South commercial development. There appears to be no floodplain on the property, although there are some areas designated for potential flooding off-site and to the east. The final development plan includes a 1,951 square foot building for a credit union. The site includes direct access, indirect access, I might add, to Gardner Road. It includes right around 13 trees and 29 shrubs. And here's a slide of the elevations for the project. The building is utilizing quality building materials, including stone, porcelain tile, and composite woods. This is the north elevation and west elevation. Again, we have plenty of transparency occurring. They did have one deviation request. That's for the access and parking standards. They have 14 spaces added onto the site. Only 6 are required per the ordinance. However, the applicant mentions that they have right around 4 to 5 tellers, and would be difficult for additional customers to come in and park. And the staff agrees that the enhancements that they've added to the site with additional landscaping lessens the effects of the additional parking. So staff is supportive of the deviation. Staff findings of the final development plan is that it is in compliance with all requirements of the code. The final development plan is consistent with the preliminary development plan. The building design is compatible to the context of the surrounding properties. The site design is generally consistent with good design and principles and practices. And the building design and size is appropriate with the size of the lot and its close proximity to the interstate. The elements are proportional to the building and create a unique structure within the south side of the community. Staff recommends approval of the final development plan for Frontier Credit Union and the recommended motion below.
Great, thank you. we have the applicant with us this evening. If there's anything you'd like to add, so please come forward, state your name and address for the public record.
Jonathan Phillips with Davidson Architecture and Engineering at 4301 Indian Creek Parkway, Overland Park, Kansas. I don't think I have anything additional to add, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Great, thank you. With that, I think we'll go to commission discussion, starting with our phone participant. Again, putting you on the spot, Commissioner Cooper. Do you have any questions, comments? We have the applicant with us, and we also have staff.
I do not.
Commissioner McNair.
No questions or comments?
Commissioner Hanson.
No questions?
Commissioner Ham.
No questions?
Commissioner Souza.
No questions?
And I have none either. With that, I would entertain a motion on this item.
After review of application FDP-22-04, the final development plan for Community Credit Union dated March 7, 2022, and staff report dated April 25, 2022, the Planning Commission approves the application and requested deviation, provided the following condition is met. 1, construction plans for any utilities, infrastructure, or public facilities shall meet all technical specifications, and public improvement plans shall be submitted and approved prior to issuance of a building permit.
Second.
We have a motion made by Commissioner Hanson with a second by McNair. Any questions on the motion? See no questions. I will take a vote on this. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Commissioner Cooper, for the record, what was your vote?
Aye.
Great. Motion carries 6-0.
Chairman Mader, before we go ahead and transition to item number 3, I just want to make a quick comment about these development plans so that especially our new commissioners understand, you know, when we get development proposals, they can enter the system in a number of different ways. If they come through the straight zoning and site plan process, you would see a site plan to review as part of that process. The plan district and development plan process that these last 2 items involve, one's getting to a preliminary stage, the other one to a final stage. What's critical about understanding these things is that these plans, if approved, become the regulatory documents for that development. So they carry the same weight as our LDC. That's why things like deviations are critical and important, because in a way what we're doing is we're looking at the overall development and saying this makes sense the way it's presented to us. It may not follow the strict guidance of the LDC, but as a development in its overall capacity, it's a better development because things make sense in a way that may not have been conceptualized under the minimum code requirements. And that's an important part to understand. The LDC is really about minimums in many ways. So granting a deviation is not necessarily allowing something to just happen because somebody doesn't want to do it. In many ways, we're looking at an overall development concept and saying, does this make sense when you put all the pieces together? Sometimes there's trade-offs. There might be more landscaping versus, you know, an enhanced building facade, depending on what that visual looks like. So just be aware of that as you're doing these things, because I think that's important. Your final development stuff does not go to the city council. When you guys look at the final development plans, you're really just looking at for consistency with the preliminary development plan at that point in time. Okay.
Good call. Thank you. Okay. Regular agenda item number 3, Brownstone Development, rezoning, Z-22-02. This is also a public hearing item. At the northwest corner of I-35 and Highway 56 West 175th Street. We have a presentation from staff this evening.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Dave Noppick, Community Development Director. Good evening, Madam Chairman, Madam Chairperson, sorry, and members of the commission. I'm going to give Bob an opportunity to rest. And I'm going to walk you through this. This is a little bit different type of proposal than maybe you're used to seeing. Again, if you remember a few months ago, I know that a couple commissioners were not part of this, but we did have a development down on South Moonlight that came forward for zoning request first to see if there was a willingness to look at the land use or approve the land use prior to going to the expense of a development plan process. And that's what we have tonight. We have a similar type of situation where this proposal is impacted not only by city's review, but also by the county's review associated with New Century Air Center. So when I'm talking tonight, I'm going to try to walk you through our city stuff as well as some of the county stuff that they're going to encounter through the review process. But because of that dual process, this applicant has requested that we go ahead and see what the reaction is to the potential rezoning to the C3 heavy commercial district and the uses that would be allowed there, because if Johnson County through the Airport Commission and the Johnson County Board of Commissioners is not willing to even look or entertain that type of land use in that proximity to the airport, then there was no sense in spending what could be upwards to hundreds of thousands of dollars in designing the detailed plans that you see in the preliminary side and doing those support studies just to be told no because the land use is not acceptable. So that's why you're seeing it in this framework tonight. So if you have questions about that as we go along, just let me know, but hopefully I've at least given you that context. In regard to the property itself, it does involve several parcels of property totaling about 59.8 acres. It's located just to the northeast of Highway 56, which is 175th Street and Cedar Niles Road intersection. That's the lit intersection that you might be used to making the entry towards the Walmart. This is on the north side of the highway, and it's just to the east, kind of northeast of the McDonald's, if you can think about that, in the KDOT offices there. The primary land use is vacant or utilized for agricultural purposes, and there are no existing structures or improved public access. There is an access easement that goes back to another property off into this direction, but as you can see from the aerial, the paved road that gets to the McDonald's kind of dead ends before you get to this area in this parcel. Also, there's a treed area or vegetation area that you can see there that's associated with some of the drainage on the property, kind of in the middle of the property, and then hedgerow vegetation along the perimeters of the property itself. Oh, I should just say the three pictures that you have there give you a rough idea of what the property conditions are out there today. In regard to zoning and the development context, the location is currently zoned A, actually in two parts of the area. As you can see to the east, the green shaded element that's within the red boundary, that is one of the parcels that's impacted. That is zoned agricultural. The middle parcel, which is in the purple, is zoned M1, which is our restricted industrial district. And then it's kind of hard on the west because there's just a fringe of property that is zoned to agricultural that is part of this also. And it's a parcel that's associated with KDOT property, but the zoning is not including all of that KDOT property, just a sliver there to the east of the McDonald's. So just be aware of that. This is all within the city of Gardner utility service area for water, sanitary sewer, and electric. That's what the yellow dashed line indicates is where our service area is currently. Just for a quick note, you'll want to see that on the other side of that service boundary to the east is Water 1 service area. To the north, when you get into the airport, you get into Johnson County wastewater as well as rural water 7 being provided up in that area. So you might also note the Grata development, which is on the south portion or the lower left or lower right of the picture. That is also in the Water 1 service area. So just so you're aware of that. The property does have limited access opportunities due to the adjacent rail and highway system that is there to the north, obviously, is the BNSF lines as well as the old Highway 56 route. And to the south, you have the off-ramp there for the southbound lanes getting to Highway 56. Both of those elements create some unique access challenges for this parcel property. Most likely, the property is going to have to be accessed from two locations to meet fire district requirements if it gets into those planning stages, which is going to likely mean a eventual connection towards Clare Road, which is quite a bit further east of this property, but also a connection somewhere to Highway 56, whether that's through the Cedar Niles intersection that exists today or some other access point that would be looked at. The surrounding area really consists of a mixture of development and zoning, primarily agricultural and vacant, commercial, industrial, and then the New Century Air Center there to the northwest. You can see that there. In regard to the comprehensive plan, our comprehensive plan was adopted in 2014. I wanted to just highlight a couple things. Within the yellow boundaries there is the parcel or the area that the rezoning request is associated with. In our comprehensive plan, we have that area identified as regional commercial on two specific maps, the future land use map for the area, and then the commercial areas map, which is a second map. That commercial areas map really focuses in on where we see commercial development occurring in the future. The regional commercial obviously is focused around the two interchanges on I-35, and then you get into the downtown area. That's kind of that bluish purple area on the map on the right-hand side, and the Main Street corridor where you see more like community level commercial going on there. The definition for regional commercial is that these are uses that provide goods and services that attract users from the greater metropolitan area. I won't read all of that, but again, the focus is really on that sales tax generation or that sales, retail sales and services element of commercial development at that point in time. And obviously these areas are considered to be best suited near the interstates and the major arterial roads within Gardner. A sub-area plan that was done as a supplement to the comprehensive plan in 2018 was the I-35 and 175th Street interchange sub-area plan. Again, in the yellow bounded area is the parcel in question or parcels in question for the rezoning, and again, it is shown as regional commercial. The thing that I want to point out here, a lot of words on this slide, I'm not going to read them all, but what happened with that sub-area plan, if you remember, the LDC was developed around the same time, so what this did was add more detail as to the intent of regional commercial and then equating that to the various zoning districts and building types and primary uses that are in the LDC. So that's where this detailed slide comes from. This is lifted directly from that sub-area plan, and you'll notice that the C3 heavy commercial district as well as the CP3 planned heavy commercial district are considered zoning districts that equate to this regional commercial land use. The building types, those just give a variety of what the building types could be, and we can talk about that if you have questions on that. What I want to point out here very quickly is there's a number of primary uses that are listed here, but by the time I get done with my staff presentation, you can see a recommendation that limits some of those uses. And we'll talk about that also if you have any questions. Another document that we need to be cognizant of here, although we have no authority from the standpoint of an adoption of this document from the city. This is a county document. It's the New Century Air Center Comprehensive Compatibility Plan. That plan was done in 1996. It is part of the Rural Johnson County Comprehensive Plan. There's a part 4 that is focused in on New Century Air Center. This is a map that the county has provided to us through which depicts the land uses within that compatibility plan. You'll note again the area is roughly bounded by the yellow boundaries there, kind of in the upper center of the map. A portion of that area is shown as general commercial, and a portion is shown as airport industrial park. A couple things I want to highlight here. The blue line that you see, kind of the curved blue line going through there, is the 1 mile area around the airport property. By state statute, this is where the county has the authority to review these developments there's a state statute regarding airports and specifically calls out the Johnson County Airports, Executive and New Century Air Center, and any development within that 1 mile radius of the properties or 1 mile distance of the property boundaries is subject to their review. Again, to look at it from the perspective of how it works in concert with airport operations and other activities on the airport. So that blue line's kind of critical. Again, you can see this property is within that. The other area that I want to point out is the black horizontal lines that are just to the left of the bounded area, because runway 1836 is the primary runway that we need to be cognizant of. That black hashed area is the flight corridor associated with the runway itself. Again, this is part of that approach process coming into the runways, and you'll see that this property is outside of that flight corridor, and we'll talk a little bit about the RPZ, which is a runway protection area that's a trapezoidal area coming off the end of the runway, and as part of the staff reviewing this, we have recommended that all development be outside of that RPZ and be outside of that flight corridor. So that's the importance of this map, is just to give you that rough idea. The supporting text in the plan document itself, they provide a purpose statement for the general commercial category. You can see there that there's a variety of land uses that are provided. This is to meet the retail needs of the surrounding neighborhoods and communities, and then it outlines a few typical land uses. But within that, there are also some guidelines for the category. So I just want to note that there are 4 different kind of guidelines that apply here that we want to look at. But when I go to the next slide, you're going to see some difference between this and the general or the airport industrial park category. And that's why I have this in here. Again, when the county's looking at things, they're going to be reviewing this request in light of what their document says about the general commercial area, as well as the airport industrial park. And what I really want to point out here is, while the uses are slightly different, you can see the airport industrial park focuses on light industrial, warehouse distribution, commercial support, and things that support airport operations. There's an additional requirement in the guidelines that has to do with buffering and screening of outdoor storage areas. Otherwise, all the wording is exactly the same in those guidelines. Okay, so what I've done is reduce that language a little bit because I wanted to pull out the difference between the land use descriptions and that additional guideline. And again, that's important to understand that this is a guideline element. These are not required pieces of plan. As with our comprehensive plan, is a guide that is looked at by the various jurisdictions, but it does not carry the weight necessarily of an ordinance or a law like the LDC does, our Land Development Code. The other part of that comprehensive compatibility plan that the applicant's going to have to be conscientious of are recommendations related to elements that could interfere with operations at the airport facility. Section 4 of the compatibility plan talks about recommendations on items such as electronic interference, lights and glare, wildlife, smoke, all those things that you want to be concerned about if you've got planes coming in and out of an airport. So they don't necessarily want things that are going to generate these problems or these issues in an adverse way. Additionally, that plan speaks to the concern regarding the assembly of people in excess of 500 persons, but I want to point out that it's not that those things are necessarily prohibited, it's that they need to be evaluated very thoroughly, and that's what they look at, because again, the concern is always if we're aggregating a bunch of people in one spot and we do have an aircraft accident, that could be catastrophic. So understanding that even though it calls out that areas with excess of 500 persons are not desirable, again, when you have that 1 mile area extending off of the airport property, that does not preclude those kinds of activities in that 1 mile area. It just means we have to evaluate them, or they have to evaluate them very closely, and they may find that they're going to preclude those uses. Okay, so the county may find that. But the last statement is what's important to understand, where it says such uses may be found to be appropriate within the airport interest area based upon a thorough evaluation of the scope of the proposed development at the proposed location with regard to airport compatibility issues. And that's that element again. These are kind of recommendations. They're going to look at these case by case as they go through the process. You have before you, I dropped off a piece of paper before the meeting. The county has asked me to make, as part of the public record, some initial comments that they put together, and I'm going to give you some background on that. In light of the way this proposal has come forward to us, a concept plan was presented by the applicant to the city, and we suggested that we go ahead and get some initial commentary from the county staff. So that memo is kind of that outline, if you will, of those initial comments. And if you look at it, I know it's a lot to read, but if you look at it, those comments really outline what I've been talking about here. These are considerations that they're going to be concerned about. So if this comes forward to the Airport Commission, it is likely it's going to get this commentary weeded through and looked at from that perspective. It also helps for us to understand maybe where the county is coming from the perspective of land use and development in that area, so that when I give you my staff recommendation, you have some background, there's sensitivity to some of the things that they're mentioning in that memo already. But understand, that is not the Airport Commission's finding. That is not necessarily the recommendation of the Airport Commission going to the Johnson County Board of Commissioners. This was an outside process where we asked the county staff to give us some initial reaction to that concept plan. The reason the concept plan is not before you tonight, though, is because we're focused on the land use issue at this point in time. So we don't want to get distracted by that concept plan. And in fact, that concept plan has evolved because of some of the comments that have been made. There were some things initially placed in the concept plan that you'll see in my recommendation will not be in any plan moving forward if you accept my recommendation on that. So in regard to the staff findings, very quickly, we have 5 basic findings. At least that's the last I counted them. We find that the request for the C3 heavy commercial zoning in this location conforms with the 2014 comprehensive plan and the 2018 I-35 175th Street interchange sub-area plan. We find that the surrounding physical context and framework in the area is conducive to future commercial development in this location, that land use in this location should be focused on specified commercial uses, that detailed planning addressing access to, from, through, and the intensity and design of potential development requires a development plan process, and that would include the preliminary and final development plan process. That's kind of why I made the comments I did about the last 2 items, to kind of make that connection for you. And then lastly, due to the proximity of the property to the New Century Air Center, Johnson County will evaluate the rezoning request and future development plans. With that, the staff is recommending approval of the rezoning from A agricultural and M1 restricted industrial districts to C3 heavy commercial district for brownstone development with the conditions identified in the recommended motion. Now, I think our legal advisor will tell us tonight you do not have to read every single word in the motion that I'm about to walk you through. So as I go through this, please keep that in mind. If you decide that this is the motion you want to go with, I believe that you'll be able to basically read that first paragraph and then cite the conditions as presented through the presentation and the staff report, because they're the same conditions. But I'm going to walk you through these 4 conditions relatively closely so that you have a good understanding of what staff is recommending. First, in regard to future use of the property, we believe that it should be limited to the following uses from table 5.2. If you remember, the last time we did this with the Moonlight, we had a similar situation where we recommended certain limited uses and used that as the base for the development. And as you can see here, this is the reduced list. I'm not going to read all of those. I will simply say they are focused more on that commercial retail and commercial service uses that are corresponding to the regional commercial definitions and intent statements from the comprehensive plan and the sub-area plan. You'll notice that we're not allowing for any of the residential dwellings that might be allowed under C3. In regard to civic and institutional spaces, we've removed a number of those from this. The reason open and civic space is there is because of detention facilities and other things that'll be required. There will be an open space requirement as part of the development plan, so we have to recognize that. But again, if you go through the retail and service employment sections, we are focused on those kind of sales tax generators, those commercial uses that would serve not only Gardner, but highway travelers as well as surrounding communities in the nearby region. Again, industrial, agricultural, we're recommending no uses there. And in communication and utilities, we've lowered that to what I would call the smaller scale items that are in that category or use category under communications and utilities. The A, C, P, T, and asterisk designations just guide you towards what type of use, whether it's an accessory use or a conditional use or permitted use, temporary use, or there are supplemental use regulations. In several instances, there are supplemental use regulations that go along with these land uses. So there would be specifications there. The next recommendation, the link to this, is that we are also recommending that a preliminary development plan be submitted, reviewed, and approved as part of the prescribed public processes for such development plans within 12 months of the approval of the rezoning action by the Johnson County Board of County Commissioners. So the idea here is if you choose to move forward with a recommendation of approval with conditions to the City Council or the governing body, it would go to them. They make their decision at that point in time based on the advisement and how they feel about this. That then goes to the Airport Commission and goes to the Johnson County Board of Commissioners. There's a lot of time in that process. So we didn't want to start the 12-month clock with your recommendation tonight or the City Council's. We wanted to wait until we had a final recommendation, because obviously the Johnson County Board of County Commissioners decides to reject the rezoning, this doesn't matter at that point, right, this condition. But we wanted to make sure that there was ample time after the Johnson County process or decision for the applicant to go ahead and develop those preliminary plans and put them together. Again, what that will do is it will then create the CP3 versus the C3 zoning. So we're basically saying land use under C3 is okay, but we're requiring as a condition, you're gonna come through the planned process, which will add the P to that C3 designation. We're also putting this condition that the applicant or developer can request an extension of the time frame noted, but they have to do that within 2 months of the 12-month deadline. What that does is they're either gonna have to make their application by that 10th month. To meet the 12-month deadline, they're gonna have to make that application by that 10th month to get through our next process, or they're gonna have to get us a request for an extension, which would come back to you then, and they would have to justify why they're requesting that extension and the timeline associated with it. So just be aware that's what that element is about. They would have that option to do an extension, but they have to demonstrate the efforts that were made over the previous 10 months, and then go ahead and provide you with justification so that you and the governing body can make a decision as to whether to grant the extension or not. Okay. I'm gonna take a breath for a second. The third item then has to do again with the preliminary and final development plans for the area, and that they will reflect several principles, if you will, or several general principles. One, that no private land development should occur in the runway protection zone or flight corridor associated with the south end of runway 1836 of New Century Air Center. The reason I call that out is there's the potential that access and the creation of a roadway may have to be in one of those two or both of those areas depending on how it aligns. But, so I don't want to discount that through access part, but at the same time, I don't want to have private land use going into those areas. Keep that as clean as possible. B, the future land use and development pattern will place open space drainage attention to the western edge of the area proposed for rezoning. This use will serve as a transition between the RPZ and any future commercial land uses identified in item 1 above. Again, the idea is RPZ, the areas that need to be protected, let's have the least intense uses as possible. Adjacent to those, push that commercial development further east. And then as you can see in item C, the intensity of land use across the rezoned area should transition from less intense commercial uses in the western portion of the area to more intense commercial uses to the eastern portion of the area. So you might have less intensity commercial, such as a commercial pad site for a restaurant on the eastern side, but you might have something that's more shopping oriented, a larger footprint, on the eastern side. On the western side would be the lower intensity pad site. So you're trying to make that transition of intensity, again, moving those things further away from the RPZ. And then letter D, the plan must provide adequate vehicular and pedestrian access and circulation to and within the development as determined by way of evaluation of options. The critical part here is the county, through its comments, have already given pretty good outline that they're going to be concerned about Cedar Niles being extended in that RPZ area and traffic stacking and the other elements that are associated with that. That may be the best option that comes out of the process, but what we're asking the applicant to do is, as part of that development plan, don't just give us that option, show us where you looked at other alternatives and what was feasible and not feasible that made this the solution that you came to us with. Because again, we want to be sensitive to the county, but we also know that this through provision, this through roadway provision is going to be necessary at some point in time to develop any of this land between the highway, interstate, and railroad all the way up to Clare Road. So as we look at this, there's going to have to be an access solution that comes out of the planning process at some point in time. And then item 4 is just simply stating what we already know. This rezoning request and subsequent development plan and plat application shall be subject to the review of the Johnson County Airport Commission and approval of the Johnson County Board of County Commissioners. That process is going to have to happen, so it's in there as a condition. I don't know, did I go a half hour or are we good? I tried. With that, I am prepared to answer any questions. This is a public hearing item. We also do have the applicant representatives here, and they may want to make a brief statement.
Okay.
But if you have questions for staff, I'm ready to answer those.
Absolutely, Dave. I don't know if we want to see if the applicant's got anything to mention real quick, and then we can move to public hearing and then commission discussion. That would be appropriate. So if the applicant would like to make any comments, please state your name and address for the public record.
Darren Dodge with Brown Center Development, 2955 Southwest Wanamaker Drive, Topeka, Kansas. I got Buck Driggs here with Driggs Design Group, our engineer, to answer any questions. David pretty much nailed everything we had. I don't really have anything else to add. We're just want to be available for questions if anybody had anything. So appreciate you guys. Appreciate your time too.
Thank you. Okay. So let's go ahead and open the public hearing. Any members of the public interested to speak on this item, please come forward, state your name and address for the public record. Individuals, I'll give you about 3 minutes. Those representing a group, 5 to 7, come forward and be heard if you'd like to speak on this item.
Commissioner,
Yes.
I
Hey,
can't
Stacy.
see, for some reason that I couldn't see everybody. I couldn't see the speaker or anything.
Thanks for hollering out. Are we back online now? You can see us?
I can see you guys now.
Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for hollering. There's no one wishing to speak on this item from the public. I would entertain a motion that we close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to close the public hearing made by McNear with a second by Ham. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Cooper?
Aye.
Great. Public hearing is now closed. 6-0 in approval of that. We'll start with commissioner questions, and Commissioner Cooper, if you'd like to kick us off with anything you have. As far as questions, comments, we've got staff here, and we also have the applicant. Anything you have?
I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. Let's circle back around and see if anything comes up as we go through the rest of the commission. Commissioner McNair?
I just want to say that there's been a tremendous amount of work put into this by a lot of people. Very complete report. I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Hanson?
David, thank you for that thorough report. I have no questions.
Commissioner Ham?
Yes. As you know, I'm an airport person. So as I was reading through this, I was thinking, okay, we let them do this and then we can catch it on the planning side. But then after reading the letter from the Johnson County Planning Department, it did bring up a lot of things, especially looking at the runway lights, things like that. I don't know if everyone has had the opportunity to be in a simulator or to look at, or when you're on an airplane, you look at the lights at night on a runway and what you can't see. And they bring up in here lights from buildings and cars, and a headlight can look like a runway light, depending on the intensity of that light. So I'm thinking air traffic controllers and pilots, they use the Bible. It's called the 7110. And when you're in school, they tell you that is written in blood, because the rules, the regulations, the things that are in that book weren't put in there until there was tragedy. So when I look at this, I'm thinking if we don't take the precautions to know what are the intentions going in here, we could be looking at tragedy if there's too much lighting coming from a building, or there's headlights or something like that. So I want to know what the intentions are for what's going into that property and protecting the runways to prevent pilot error. And so that's my big concern. So I'm not opposed to the project, but I want to know exactly what's going there so that we can prevent tragedy.
And what will answer that question is the preliminary and final development plan piece, right? So your thought process is right in line, right, with everything you're mentioning is right in line. But just like the development kind of to the south of this, and the map that's up there is just the general area map. So if you can see the I-35 interchange, I don't have a cursor to move around here, but in the red boundaries is the area that's proposed for the rezoning. Okay, the McDonald's is just to the left of that. The KDOT offices and the Salt Dome are sitting kind of the north and west. If you can see the end of the runway, and you can kind of see the light markers coming off of that center point of the runway, you can kind of envision where that runway center line is, okay, in relationship to that. The development that is to the south of 175th Street, including the Hampton Inn that was done not too long ago, that 5-story building, the Panda Express that was before you about a month or two ago, the Go Car Wash, which is almost in line with the runway itself, and even the Walmart were subject to review by the Airport Commission and by Johnson County Board of County Commissioners. And what I can tell you from an operational standpoint, they look at those development plans very, very closely. And in fact, for the commissioners who've been here for a while, when the Grata development, even which is on the other side of I-35, was being developed, there was some movement of some of the structures based on the plans for the Treadway apartments and things like that to accommodate airport concerns. So everything you're talking about, yes, gets looked at in those details, including the lighting and everything else that's there. The unusual part of this that's hard to determine, again, we're trying to push everything east because we do think the further away we are from that center line, that flight corridor, that RPZ, the safer or the better that hopefully those percentages get, right, for anything catastrophic happening. And I think that's where we're falling in line with a number of the comments that the county's already kind of made in those initial concepts. I think the other part of it, though, is that the concern with the access road is the other feature. And I think the applicant is going to be looking for some guidance from that Airport Commission and the County Board of County Commissioners as to the acceptability of access coming off of Cedar Niles. To date, they have been accommodating the commercial development that's been occurring, what I'll call in closer proximity to the flight corridor and the can't say that for the RPZ because it stops kind of just short of 175th Street. But when you look at that, I can tell you that full evaluation does occur. I think the applicants have found that out just from the initial reaction to a concept plan. But that's also why I'm limiting those uses in that first condition. There were some uses that were originally proposed that had some public assembly associated with them, such as soccer fields, a potential event type center, those kinds of things. And in reaction to some of the concern, those uses have been pulled from what would have normally been allowed under our C3 zoning. So we've kind of kept narrowing that list of uses down. If the land use question is answered, if the county and the city agree that this is a C3 zoning with those limited uses is appropriate, then the developer needs to come back with all those details you're talking about, and those will be evaluated. The airport operational element of this will really be evaluated by the county.
Yeah.
And your interest and your sensitivity to it is absolutely dead on, and actually can be very helpful to the applicant hearing that tonight or in the future meetings, so that they understand that that is something that's of concern there. I think I'll stop with that.
Okay. All right, that was my 2 cents.
Yeah. You just happen to have more knowledge than others on the commission.
That's appreciated. No, that was I appreciate it. Yeah.
It's kind of scary.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. With that, I don't have any questions. I agree. This is a very thorough report.
Yes.
Good discussion topics here. I'll just circle around one more time since I don't have Commissioner Cooper's face to see if there's anything else that might have came up during that discussion. You'd like to weigh in on, Commissioner Cooper?
No, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay. Just kind of looking around here.
No comments.
Okay. If we don't have anything else, I would entertain motion on this item then?
Second.
I can't make the motion.
I can read it.
Yeah, if we get.
Assuming I've got the right
flip
Yep.
the slide up. And as I, oh, go ahead, Spencer, you were gonna say something. so-
Yeah, how are we doing this motion?
Yeah.
So, as you guys make this motion, as much as we all might laugh hearing someone try to read this all, if you want to stop at provided the following conditions are met, and then just say, as stated in the staff report, are they in our written staff report?
Yeah, they're in
Okay.
the staff
Yeah, as
report.
stated in our written staff report, dated April 25th, 2022. That will be enough. If you'd like to try to read it all, we'll just believe that you can do it. Go ahead and incorporate the staff report.
After review of application Z-22-02 Brownstone Development, parcel IDs CF231420-2003, CR231420-2002, and CF231420-2010. In the staff report dated April 25th, 2022, the Planning Commission recommends rezoning such legally described area from A, agricultural, /M-1 restricted industrial districts to C3 heavy commercial district, provided the following conditions are met as outlined in the staff report dated April 25th, 2022.
Second.
We have a motion made by Commissioner Hanson with a second by Commissioner McNear. Any questions on the motion? With that, I will take a vote on the motion. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Commissioner Cooper, for the record, what was your vote? I believe it was,
Aye.
great, thank you. Motion carries 6-0.
And
That,
I'm gonna, before we go, I do have a couple discussion
Discussion
items.
items.
Yeah, but before we get there, I would suggest, again, I was trying to be focused on the land use question because that's really what's before us. But Commissioner Ham did bring up some sensitivities regarding some things, and I think with the applicant here, it may be worthy if you think you have some concerns regarding some of those things or things that you think you would be sensitive to, if you don't mind kind of stating those a little bit here. It's not part of the formal motion for the land use piece of this, but it could help guide them in regard to the development planning piece of it. So I don't know if there's some things that are maybe the high sensitivity areas and maybe a few things that you may be concerned about, but I think they would be glad to hear those things to help them as they keep looking at this moving forward.
I know a lot of my concern, glare to pilots when they're coming in. If we're looking at a lot of retail, some in the condition 1, we've got retail, small, general, warehouse. Glare coming from lights into pilots' view, that can be dangerous. That can be blinding to them. So we need to be sensitive to the glare the reflective glare coming off of buildings. If we're talking about access roads, we need to make sure that those access roads, when you build them, where the potential headlights are not in the path of the pilots, to where they're not mistaking those headlights, either blind, because like LED lights, those like bright lights that new cars have, that they're not blinding to pilots, or that they're not in an area to where the pilots can mistake those headlights as the runway lights. Those are my major concern, is lighting and reflective glare to pilots.
great call.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking around here to see if any of the other commissioners or our remote commissioner might have other concerns to add. They're great call outs. Okay, I think we've covered that, Dave. Thank you for
All right.
pausing. What else for a discussion?
Just a couple quick things. I will work on a workshop, as we mentioned before, kind of the CIP, long-range kind of public improvement stuff, to try to get something where maybe we have staff get with you from Public Works, and we'll sit down and talk about how these processes unfold and where we look at these different things. I assume if we did something like at a 6 PM prior to a meeting, that would work for most people's schedules. Is that okay if we
Yes.
try to build it in that way? So I'll talk to Public Works about maybe next month or June or something like that where we can put something together. I do know the CIP, we had an initial meeting on it with finance, but we haven't gotten to the point internally that we even have something drafted to come forward yet. So we might time it where we can do the workshop a month in advance of when that item comes forward to your consideration. So just be aware of that. The other thing that I just want to mention for folks, we got a strange situation coming up with both reappointments and election of officers. We actually have 3 commissioners that are up for reappointment at the end of June, from what I understand. Now, I'm having the city clerk check all this, so when I say this is just so you know I'm sensitive to it. Austin Juniman is one, Stacy Cooper is another, and then Adriana, you're the 3rd one that I know of. At least that's what's published on the website, so I'm kind of going by that. That 6:30 is kind of that date of your appointment. So I do know that through the city clerk's office, they look through the reappointments, and they look through applicants and things like that. I have just started a conversation with the city clerk to say, okay, how does this unwind? Because one of the things I'm sensitive to, by your bylaws, you're supposed to have officer elections at the end of May. And what I'm kind of most concerned about are things like, okay, how does this time out if somebody decides that they don't want to be reappointed, if a reappointment doesn't occur, or if an appointment does, do I have enough commissioners there to vote on? So I'm trying to play this game of understanding first what's the process for reappointments and how that goes through and how that can time maybe better for our election process in May. So just be aware of that. Adriana, it probably impacts you a little bit just because you're serving as chair, and that's one of the elected offices. So I just wanted to give a heads up to that with the idea that when I get some guidance from the city clerk's office, I'll know exactly how this process unfolds. And I'll probably contact, I know Austin was sick. He emailed me this afternoon, so he was sick, so he's not on the line. But for Commissioner Cooper and for you, I will try to get all 3 of you. When I know something, I'll try to get that information out to you as quickly as possible so we can move forward with that
Do
process.
you know, can I ask a question? Do you know if when Commissioner Juniman and I were appointed, were we filling in somebody else's term?
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think, and I don't know that for a fact, but I think that's why these things aligned real weird, was because they were all kind of filling, well, not all of them. Adriana's wasn't, I'm sorry, but for you and Commissioner Juniman, I believe you were both filling in terms, and I think that's where this kind of aligned in a crazy way, because usually I'm not used to having 3 commissioners all at the same date, basically. So that's a little bit unusual. So,
Because I know when we got appointed, we weren't for full terms.
yeah.
So
we'll figure that out. I'll try to get as much information from the clerk's office. Like I said, they run that whole process over out of the clerk's office, so I'm not familiar with it. I just want to make sure that we hold to the spirit of bylaws and also do whatever's correct. So I don't want to create some weird situation here. So just be aware of that. I do also want to make, unless there's more questions on that.
Well, I don't think on that.
Okay.
Keep going.
I do want to make a comment. You know, the public comment that we heard earlier about development in the community, what I'm going to tell you is development's happening all over this place right now. Just to give you a rough idea, I did some rough numbers, and I'm not ready to present them publicly, but at this point in time, about 78% of our growth is occurring north and west of I-35. So as you move further north and west through the community, that's kind of where our bulk of our development's occurring. It's not just 167th and Moonlight. We are getting development interest in all quadrants of the community. You know, the Grata development, things like that, represent about 22% of the, what I'll call the approved development that we have online. That's not all under construction right now. That's just things where we have plats that have been approved for single family development or projects that have been approved at least through the preliminary planning stages. So it's a significant amount of growth going on almost in every direction, and even infill, as you know, with the Bergdorf property, that was 98 acres roughly of property, 300 housing units right there that's in this process too. So it's not just happening at Moonlight. We're seeing growth really throughout the whole community right now.
Isn't it, I mean, we don't have a whole lot of control over what a purchaser wants to do with the property in terms of putting in a proposal to the planning commissioner. It's just, it kind of is what it is. If we have a development that comes in like that one development we had tonight, it could have been a residential development. It just happens to be that that developer wanted to do XYZ versus ABC.
Correct. It's you are absolutely right. Due process, any application that comes into my office, we move it through the process. Now I try to, with Bob and Public Works staff, we try to meet with them as early as possible, get an understanding of the location and what they're doing, and if we're seeing any things where we don't have the appropriate level of infrastructure, sanitary sewer available, or water, or roads in some instances, if they are totally inadequate, we pretty much tell the developer, if you want to do this, you may have to make these improvements at your cost, because the city is not prepared to make those improvements. So legally, through the LDC, I'm not preventing anybody to make an application because I can't, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Due process, they come in, whether an application is valid or invalid is not my job. My job is to try to sometimes say, you're about to waste your money because of these reasons, but I can't prevent applications from coming to you. So you will, though, find that if something like that's happening, staff, in the staff reports, you'll either find recommendations of denial or there'll be certain conditions because of those reasons. But again, you're advising, and then it's up to the city council as to what they do. So yeah, we're kind of part of the market process, and right now Gardner's in the crosshairs for development. And as we look at that, we're trying to evaluate how do we keep up with it.
So are you saying that we're going to see proposals that the staff may say we don't? Okay.
Yep.
I thought maybe I had
No, my job is not to just approve everything that comes through my
I
office.
understand.
No.
I thought
I'll make that clear for public record too.
I thought we were voting only stuff that was already approved by you guys.
No. So staff is, on these kinds of things, we're nothing more than an evaluator and a recommender. Okay, we're not making these decisions per se. Okay, now there are some things, if somebody has the appropriate zoning already and they bring a plan forward that meets all the zoning requirements and meets the administrative requirements on some cases, those will go through the process. Those are relatively rare. Especially with our ordinances the way they are, there's a lot of requirements that it's hard sometimes to just meet them outright. But on the same hand, like I said, they're there to help improve the quality of the development that's before you. So staff, when we're working with people, in fact, I think it's fair, if I go too far on this, you smack me or cover my mouth or just hit me. Like Frontier, yeah, he'll do it every day. Frontier Community Credit Union, for instance, as they came through, we made some suggestions to improve that site plan and to do some things that we felt would be more acceptable, okay? And some of it had to do with traffic circulation on site, okay? So when we get people in there, it's not that we don't try to work towards a solution that's a better solution or try to influence that. And so many times when it's getting to you, they have many times hit the items that we want them to address as staff. And if we're feeling good about it, that's why we'll recommend approval. But there are times we'll get development proposals and the developer will say, I'm not interested in doing any of that. And I'll say, well, if you're going to get a recommendation of approval from us, it's going to have these conditions on it, or you run the risk that we may recommend denial, and it's up to you, at that point. I think that's a fair assessment in general. So we're trying to evaluate these things as closely as we can, And for Bob and I and staff here, every time you guys make a recommendation, every time you're making a decision or a recommendation, you're giving us fodder for saying to the next person, here's what the Planning Commission's looking for. Here are the things that they've raised questions about in the past. You need to be prepared to answer that, or you need to be understanding that the commission may not accept this because they just had a case very similar to this in front of them a week ago or a month ago, and man, they rejected it. They recommended denial, or they didn't approve it. So we use a lot of this information during the meeting, the things that you talk about, to sit there and say, what are the sensitivities of the commissioners? And we try to interject that into the application process with the applicant and go, understand when you're before this group, here are some of the things they're gonna be looking for. I mentioned to the applicant that Commissioner Ham was near traffic control. So, you know, so there's some of that to anticipate, and it's not to dissuade the commentary, it's not to, but the more prepared everybody kind of is in this process, the more professional the process goes, the more the commentary is focused on the right things, the more the questions and the answers are getting in front of you, and so that's what we try to assist to do.
That's appreciated.
Dave, I just had one comment I wanted to make. The July meeting,
Yes.
I absolutely will not be available.
Okay.
I've got a second knee replacement on the 18th, and I will still be under pain meds, and I don't think it would be a good idea for me to participate in that meeting.
Wait a minute.
As interesting as that might be legally, thank you.
Right, we appreciate that.
Oh, it's prescription. It's
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So I appreciate your time tonight.
Yep.
Actually, we did pretty good with these 3 items. There were 2 of them that
Could have been.
That was good.
a little bit long.
Good, all right. Looks like we're ready to adjourn. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
We had a second, I heard.
You heard second.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, I heard a motion made by McNear, and let's give Commissioner Souza
Yes.
the second on that one. So all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0, meeting's adjourned.